Hello everyone, and welcome to episode 2 of the Battle of the Rappahannock custom multiplayer game. In part 1, we went over the backstory of the battle and also the general rules of the game and how it works. In this part, we're going to go over the options that were presented to both sides as far as their setup goes, and then we'll cover the first dozen or so turns of the game itself. As mentioned in episode 1, each side would be given 3 options as far as how their troops were set up on the map itself. For the Confederates, these are their 3 options. First, there's the concentrated advance, which would have Anderson, Ewell, and Hill enter the map from the west. Second, there's the right flank attack. This brings Hill and Ewell on the board from the south, while Anderson comes from Culpeper in the west. And lastly, the left flank attack. This would have Hill and Ewell advancing from the northwest and moving on to the high ground around the Warrenton Pike, while Anderson advanced from Culpeper. The Confederate side then had a chance to discuss it amongst themselves and determine which of the 3 options they wanted to go with. Lee began the discussion by dismissing option number 3 as being impractical, with 2 Confederate corps far to the north and separated from Anderson's corps by the Hazel River and the Rappahannock River. So that option is gone. He then stated that option number 1 has a lot to recommend it. The road network in this part of the county is good, and we're by no means committed to simply steaming up the railroad and slamming into the Yanks coming down the other way. We also go a long way to immediately secure some of our key positions on our side of the Rappahannock, and our northern flank is protected by the Hazel River. But then he also said that option number 3 was a bold plan, but that it would leave Anderson to contest whatever enemy force was heading along the railroad line towards the Rappahannock River crossings in their front. But this plan would also likely lead to getting a large part of their army across the Rappahannock River earlier and perhaps without being seen by the enemy if they were concentrated only on the line of the Orange and Alexandria Railroad. So the Confederate officers discussed it for a while and came up with a decision, and that decision would be option number 2. Option number 2 gives us the best possible chance of attacking a key enemy position east of the Rappahannock while keeping our forces within an acceptable supporting distance from each other. Further, I believe we also stand a better chance of concealing our forces for longer by coming up through the woods to attack the Federals. After some further discussion, the Confederate plan ended up looking something like this. To begin with, Hill and Ewell were quickly to cross the Rappahannock River and threaten Elkton and Bealeton from the south. Lee stated that it is my intent for Hill's and Ewell's corps to cross the Rappahannock in order to threaten both Bealeton and Elkton, and also to threaten the flank of any Union advance down the Orange and Alexandria Railroad in the direction of Rappahannock Station. Ewell agreed and stressed that they should try and take the initiative and certainly push or at least feint from multiple directions if possible, which might exploit the cautiousness and poor habits of the Yankees. Then, Anderson was to move along the railroad line and either defend if attacked or attack if the enemy showed themselves to be too cautious between Brandy Station and Bealeton. With that, the Confederate plan was complete and they were ready to start the game. The Federals were also presented with 3 different options as far as how they wanted their troops to be set up on the map, and these were their options. First, there was the concentrated advance with Reynolds, Hooker, and Sickles coming on the map from the east. And then the left flank attack. This would have Reynolds and Hooker in the south, while Sickles drove in from Warrenton from the east. Lastly, the double envelopment. This would spread out the army with Sickles coming in from the north, Reynolds from the southeast, and Hooker from the east. There was not much discussion on this topic amongst the Federals, and one option jumped right out at them, and that option was option number 3. They felt that option number 3 offered the most flexibility as it spaced out the Union Army and would allow each large Grand Division to act independently as its own mini-army. Hooker also liked the idea of getting the 5th Corps and the large artillery reserve onto the open ground near Rappahannock Station and advancing towards the Rappahannock River. Sickles and Reynolds could then advance and distract and or attack either enemy flank as the battle developed. And this would be their plan. To begin with, they would move straight ahead and uncover the enemy's intentions as they went. Their strategy will become apparent quickly, either offensive or defensive, based on whether their cavalry is rushing over the Rappahannock River or not. With a major river running northwest to southeast, Hooker believed that it was unlikely the rebels would cross the river on either of their flanks and risk dividing their army across such a large natural barrier. If they are going on the offensive, it will be right up the middle, and we will know that quite soon. Alright, it's time for my unasked for 2 cents. And I always love giving this as I watch these games. So here is the map, the overhead map as we get started. And here is the 2 plans by the armies. As you can see, there's going to be conflict. Reynolds needs to watch out. Alright, because of the plans that these 2 sides have chosen, conflict is going to come much sooner than I think either side believes. And for Reynolds, he's got 31,700 men with him. He's got the 1st Corps and the 2nd Corps, and those are the 2 best corps in the Union Army. He also has a division of cavalry. But that doesn't seem to matter because there are 2 Confederate corps coming directly at him. Hill and Ewell have 47,950 men between them and the 2 cavalry divisions which are moving with them. On the other side, Anderson, he also needs to watch out because he's got 22,500 men with him, and that includes his forces and a cavalry division, while moving in his direction are 52,150 Federals. That includes the 3rd Corps, the 5th Corps, and the 6th Corps, along with the artillery reserve, which is moving with Hooker's Grand Division coming in from Warrenton. Both sides are going to have some real issues in this battle as far as being outnumbered and outflanked. For me, the key to this battle is patience. Reynolds is going to be hit early in the battle, and it's going to dishearten the Federals to see that their plans are thrown out the window right at the very start. But they need to remember that Sickles and Hooker, they're coming. It's just going to take them much longer to get into the battle than it's going to take for Hill and Ewell to get into the battle. So while I think the Confederates are going to win round 1, if the Federals are patient, they're going to win round 2. They just need to stay in the battle, follow their plan, and they will eventually come in against Anderson, and at that point, it's anybody's game. So really, it's who can go the distance. The Federals need to find a way to survive the early attacks by Hill and Ewell. If they can do that, if Reynolds can stay mobile, if he can figure out a way not to be destroyed, basically, it can be anybody's game. But the key is going to be having the patience to realize that this is a long battle and that whatever happens in the first few hours must be overcome, especially if you're the Federals. All right, let's go ahead and begin here and get things started. This map in front of you is the end of turn number 2. I always skip turn number 1 in my games. I use that as an administrative turn. On the map there, you will see it is 4 a.m. You will see the total strength of the 2 armies on the left-hand side, while on the right, you'll have all the points, infantry losses, cavalry losses, and so on that occur as we progress through the battle. On the map immediately, you can see that, as usual in every game, the cavalry is rushing everywhere, and that always happens. Both sides are sending out their cavalry forces and trying to locate the enemy as soon as possible. Moving to the 4:20 a.m. turn now, you can see the armies are growing rapidly, and that there are more brigades on the map. And there's a fight coming, and it's coming fast. Already, Hampton and Kilpatrick are nearing the Rappahannock River. They can't quite see each other because it is dawn still, and there's only a 4 hex limit, but they are about to make contact right around that river. At the 4:40 a.m. turn now, we have our first casualties of the battle, and that did not take long at all. The Confederates ran directly into Skinker's Ford and did not have a good time there. Kilpatrick's division is in position now north of the Rappahannock River, with Starr and Gregg at Ellis's Ford and Skinker's Ford. To the south, Hampton's division has arrived, with Fitzlee on the left and Hampton on the right, trying to get across the river. Both sides have taken a position along either side of the Rappahannock River and have canceled each other out. This is now stalemated. It's going to take the infantry from one side or the other to force their way across this river at some point. So crossing the river at Fields Ford, right down here, is W.H.F. Lee's brigade. He's already moved across the river, and the Federals do not know he's there. Up in the north, Sickles' Grand Division is on the map. Buford is moving towards Waterloo Bridge and along the Warrenton Pike, while Sickles' 3rd Corps is directly behind him. And that brings us to the 5 a.m. timeout, which allows both sides to discuss openly what is going on. If you remember, there are communication rules in place which allow open communication only during designated hours. And the 5 a.m. hour is the last open communication turn until 6 a.m. It's important to remember that neither side expected to run into each other so quickly, nor in the vicinity of where they did at Skinker's Ford in the south. Hill stated that, "I reckon they are just as surprised to run into us as we into them," and that is 100% true. The Federal infantry could be spotted in the distance moving northward and not towards the fords just yet. With the 5 a.m. turn, the sun is up, and the distance that they can see has obviously increased to 70 hexes. Ewell was concerned. Seeing what their infantry decides to do now should help us decide how to proceed. If the infantry continues to truck along north and west, these crossings may still be viable for our infantry to use. If they decide to shift infantry towards the cavalry we've met, things may become more static for me, and perhaps Hill as well. I'm sure they are going to suspect that there will be infantry behind the cavalry they've encountered. We will see how the enemy reacts. And although the Confederates don't know that that is Wadsworth's division of the 1st Corps, they can see infantry moving to the northwest. The 5 a.m. rebel orders were sent out by Lee, and Lee believed that Hampton's cavalrymen had checked a Union attempt to launch a cavalry division across the river to raid along the Confederate right flank. Ewell would watch the crossings in his front, while Hill continued to move unseen towards Fields Ford, where W.H.F. Lee's cavalrymen were already safely across the river. On the other side, the Federals had their 5 a.m. discussion, and they were generally unfazed by the appearance of the Confederate cavalry south of the Rappahannock River on Reynolds' flank. Reynolds wrote that, "Unless ordered otherwise, my infantry will continue moving west. I see no reason at the moment to divert it. The Reb cavalry dispositions to the south suggest defense. They seem to be assuming we will cross the river and that they can ambush us. I have no intention of crossing the river. I will assume a defensive posture and await developments." Hooker agreed with Reynolds that it was too early to determine the rebel intentions south of the Rappahannock River. The orders issued at dawn would continue to be in place. All forces would continue to advance westwards towards the Rappahannock River. That brings us to the 5 a.m. turn. As you can see here, Hampton has gone into a complete defensive position south of the Rappahannock River, while over to his west, W.H.F. Lee's brigade has fallen back over the Rappahannock River at Fields Ford. Not really sure why they fell back across the river. I'm sure they had a reason, but to me, once you're across, stay across. On to the 5:20 turn. Down here, you can see that Early has come into view. Early is now directly behind Hampton's division, and he is within sight of Reynolds' forces. Speaking of Reynolds, he has altered his course. Now that he can see the Confederate infantry arriving, he has turned to the south. So Reynolds' 1st Corps is now moving southward to reinforce Starr and Gregg and make sure that the Confederate infantry can't force their way across the river. In the center, Jenkins' small cavalry brigade is moving towards the Rappahannock River, and in the distance there, you can see Gregg's cavalry division from the Federals is also moving for the same crossing points. 5:40 a.m. now, you will see down here in the south that Rhodes's division is moving for Fields Ford. They are all unseen. The Federals have no eyes on any part of this battlefield yet. And really, Reynolds has stopped moving west, and I'm not sure why. He's got 2 cavalry units sitting here within one easy turn of reaching Fields Ford. If they move to the west, they'll be able to uncover Rhodes's crossing and at least have eyes on that part of the battlefield. Behind them is the Iron Brigade, and it's possible they are waiting for some infantry support before moving forward, but it would seem that you'd probably want to start moving that direction right about now. In the north, Buford has reached the Rappahannock River, but he has not had any offensive orders to cross it just yet. So it looks like he's going to reach the river, go into a defensive position, and await the arrival of Sickles' infantry behind him. And already that brings us to the 6 a.m. rebel discussion period. And this is the last discussion either side will have until 8 a.m. in the game. Anderson told the group that Jenkins's cavalrymen would be in position at Tin Pot Ford along the Rappahannock River soon, and Wilcox was just a few hours behind them. Jones's cavalrymen were to drive past the Hazel River and scout the northern areas of the map. Hill was to move over the river and then northward to attack the flank of any Union force caught crossing ahead of Anderson's corps, while Ewell was to keep early in a defensive position at Skinker's Ford, while Johnson moved with his division to Kemper's Ford to guard Hill's right flank as he advanced northward. And now over to the Union side, and as mentioned earlier, this is the last discussion that they will have until 8 a.m. There was some, but not much, concern about what was happening to the west of the First Corps. Reynolds felt that if the Federals did cross to his side of the river, he could either drive them back or fight them on even terms. Reynolds and Hooker were still unsure about rebel intentions on the southern front, but neither really seemed all that concerned just yet. Sickles and Hooker would continue to move forward with their columns as Reynolds felt out the rebel positions in the south to determine their intentions. Because this is the last discussion period that the two sides have for the next 2 hours of gameplay, let's go ahead and give you my unasked for 2 cents about what's going on. Alright, let's begin with the rebels. Hill is going where? Because wherever he thinks he's going, I don't think that's where he's going. His orders are to move up the Rappahannock River like so, and then fall on the flank of whatever federal force happens to be crossing at that period. Why would he move with his right flank completely in the air? It doesn't make sense. It's impractical. He needs to worry about uncovering what's directly to his right flank, and that is the Federals that they can see blocking Ewell's advance. And so he's not going to the north. He's going to the east. Rhodes is going to cross that river, and he is going to completely ignore this route, I can almost guarantee you, and he's going to go this direction, because it's what makes sense. Rhodes doesn't have the ability to march north if his right flank is completely unprotected, and it's going to take Johnson just too long to get there. And speaking of Johnson, Johnson's division is going the wrong way. His orders are to move down here and cross over the Rappahannock River at Kemper's Ford. That's going to create one hell of a traffic jam between Hill's corps and Johnson's division, and I don't see it as practical. Johnson should instead be going this direction. If he were to cross here instead of here, the end result would be amazing, because the Federals would then have to move to counter him. And when they move to counter that, what's going to happen? Rhodes is going to have a clear shot directly on the Federal flank. And the problem is that the Confederates just need to accept the battle in front of them. Sometimes your plans don't always go the way you thought they would go, and their desire to stick to their original plan of moving Hill up to the north to come into the center of the map is just not feasible anymore. Hill needs to move to uncover the crossings to allow Ewell to cross. And I think that's what's going to happen. I just don't envision a scenario in which Hill completely abandons his right flank and Ewell and just moves off to the north. So I think that's what's going to happen. Whether or not Lee anticipates it is another story. So for the Federals, Reynolds needs to look to the west. Look to the west. He's got cavalry units right here, and it's killing me because they are just one turn away from getting some eyes on the numerous fords crossing the river to their west. And the faster they do that, the better, because with each turn, the number of Confederates at that river crossing just grows and grows. Sticking to the plan, the Federals are sticking to their plan, which, they don't see a reason to accept battle. For the Confederates in the South, it's different. They need to adjust their plan based on what they're seeing. The Federals haven't seen much because they don't have eyes on the advancement of Hill's corps. So for them, sticking to the plan seems like the right thing to do. Sickles is going to continue on his path, Hooker will continue on his path, and Reynolds will continue to look to the south, where the cavalry and infantry of the Confederates is within plain sight. Moving to the 6 a.m. turn now, you can see that WHF Lee has crossed again over the Rappahannock River, and he's still unseen. The Federals have made no moves to block him whatsoever. But they have blocked one another down here in the south, where the two sides have neutralized each other by bringing up infantry and artillery to cover the crossings along the Rappahannock. And the Federal cavalry, they haven't moved again. It's been 2 turns. They just need to move to the west. It's killing me at this point. WHF Lee, Rhodes, Pender are all completely unseen by the Federals at this point. Imboden crosses. Just to the north of WHF Lee, Imboden's cavalry brigade has also crossed the Rappahannock River. And this will create even more problems for the Federal cavalry and for the Federal plans. At 6:20 a.m., Jenkins has reached Tin Pot Ford. His brigade is there. It is a small brigade, but they have reached it first. But it's open fields, and there's really not a good defensive area around there. Their best hope is that Gregg's cavalry division on the other side of the river does not make a rush to cross. In the north, Buford has halted at the river. I thought he would. He's gone into a defensive position. He's building breastworks. He is waiting to see if the Confederates are moving to the north to cross there. And once more in the south, the Federal cavalry has not moved. The Iron Brigade is right there behind him now. If they were waiting for infantry support, it has arrived. They need to move to the west because Rhodes is now across the river. Confederate infantry has marched unseen over Kemper's Ford there, and they are moving directly for the Federal flank. They have remained unseen. The 6th Corps and the 2nd Corps are arriving on the map now. You can see Caldwell's division down in the southeast, while Wright's division has arrived from the north. The 6:40 a.m. turn now. You can just look at the center of the map, and you'll see that the Confederate cavalry is everywhere. They've got numerous units moving in all directions, trying to get eyes on as many Federal units as they can, and that is extremely effective. The Federals have moved to the west, finally. Federal cavalry and the Iron Brigade have moved about a half mile to the west, but neither has made any contact with the Confederates just yet. In the center, Gregg is halted, and this is a interesting development because he faces only Jenkins's brigade across the river, and Jenkins has a small Confederate brigade of about 1,100 men. And against him, the Federals can bring over 4,000. So this is an excellent opportunity for the Federals to get aggressive, capture Tin Pot Ford across the river, and allow Meade's infantry and artillery at least to cross over and get involved in the battle without having to force their way across later on against Confederate artillery and infantry. In the south, Rhodes remains hidden, and I can't believe it. The Federals have numerous eyes all to the south, but in the west, they just haven't seen him coming. So he is inching closer to their flank without anyone realizing it. Because simply, all is quiet on the Rappahannock. Early and Doubleday have canceled each other out, and they're just waiting, staring at one another over the river. Really not much is going on. At the 7 a.m. turn, along came Jones, Jones's brigade of Confederate cavalry has spread all over the Hazel River, and they extend all the way up into the Warrenton Turnpike. The Iron Brigade has reached the crossroads there, as you can see, and they have taken a position directly between what they don't know is two Confederate cavalry forces, both to the north and to the south of them. And really, it's just the fog of war that is happening down there. It's crazy for me to think that neither side has really any idea what they're about to run into. The Confederate cavalry has at least identified through question marks that there's something there. Their cavalry mounted scouts have made contact and turned around, but they don't know exactly what they ran into. For the Federals, they simply don't know. Starr's cavalry brigade has no eyes on roads whatsoever, nor does the Iron Brigade. In the west, Wilcox is moving to reinforce Jenkins, but still there's no action between Jenkins and Gregg's cavalry division just across the river. The Second Corps for the Federals is coming, and they are desperately needed on that right flank. Caldwell's division has turned in that direction. It's just a matter of, can they get there in time? The 7:20 a.m. turn now, and like I said, the fog of war in this area blows my mind away. Let's just actually zoom in and take a look at what's going on. So here we have the map, and I'm going to steal a little space up in the corner here to use as a blackboard. So the Iron Brigade still doesn't know what's going on. They are right there at the Embry House. You can see they're at the crossroads. And the rebels, they do know what's going on because of this cavalry unit right here, which has advanced and with their mounted skirmishers, been able to pinpoint a few question marks in the woods there. Once they did that, the Confederates realized they had an opportunity here to capture whatever is at the Embry House. They don't know what's there. I believe that they assume it's cavalry because of Pettigrew's brigade down to Ellis's Ford. They've spotted Federal cavalry move into the northwest, and I believe that that's what the Confederates think they're about to run into. And their plan is to simply follow Military 101 textbook, which is if you have an enemy at a crossroads and you have possession of two of the three roads, you cut off the other road because then you can capture whatever is in between. Daniel's brigade is moving to get in behind the Embry House, and you've got Iverson there moving directly up that road with O'Neill and Ramseur and some Confederate cavalry moving to block the northern escape route for whatever is at the Embry House. Once these three forces combine, they will form a perfect trap to capture whatever is there, assuming that they don't move. Starr, his cavalry brigade is nearby, but he has no eyes on anything going on to the north of him. Instead, he's looking in this direction, Rogers's Ford. Beyond Rogers's Ford is Pender's division. And Pender is down here hiding, and he's doing this on purpose. He knows that Starr can see what's going on at Rogers's Ford, and he does not want to let the Federals know that there is any infantry anywhere near this part of the board, and that is a very smart play. So back to the overhead map now. You know what? It's a big board. It really is. And these two sides continue to move towards one another. It's just taken a long time to develop with Sickles in the north and Hooker with Meade's column in the center. On to the 7:40 a.m. turn now, and we have had some skirmishing at least, but not where you'd think it would be. Imboden's brigade has moved and attacked a 50-man Federal cavalry scouting unit and wiped them out right here. And there's been more skirmishing, again, not where you'd think, up in the north between Davis's Federal cavalry brigade and some units from Jones's brigade. And some horse artillery has gone into action right here in the center across Tin Pot Ford. And Anderson, he's coming up towards that area to reinforce Jenkins's cavalry brigade, and he'll reach there about the same time that the Federal infantry does from Barnes's division of the 5th Corps. Speaking of the 5th Corps, Meade has divided his force. Meade realizes something is going on now. Imboden's cavalry force is a threat to his southern flank, and he needs to move some men against them in order to secure the direct route between his force and Reynolds to the southeast. But right here, peaceful, easy feeling. There is no skirmishing. There is nothing going on. The Iron Brigade has moved slightly to the south. They have skirmishers deployed, but they have yet to make any contact with the Confederates in front of them, who are as equally as cautious about not giving away what they're trying to do. And that brings us to the end of episode 2. And what am I looking forward to in the next episode? I think it's pretty obvious. What is going to happen to the Iron Brigade? They don't know, but they've stuck their head directly into the lion's mouth. Reynolds against Hill and Ewell. This seems like it's going to happen. It's taken a while to develop, but it seems like it's about to go down. And also the action at Tin Pot Ford. Jenkins's brigade versus Gregg's cavalry division, and also the arrival of Federal and Confederate infantry from Anderson's Corps and Meade's Corps. Once they begin to converge at Tin Pot Ford, there's a lot of open fields, and it's going to be an artillery battle once they arrive. All right, thank you for watching, and be sure to tune in for future episodes as we continue to watch what is going on at the Battle of the Rappahannock.